turn that over to you.
Good morning. We are ready. So Cheryl is going to share our presentation. So give us just a little bit. I would like to thank you all for inviting us to speak at this workshop. I've heard about the Southern Exchange for years. I've only been able to attend one in person in Virginia. I know it's a great opportunity and great opportunity to get together and network and just see all the good work that's going on and sharing what's happening in the country. It's a great way to learn when we see what other folks are doing too. So without further ado, I will we'll get ready. We'll get started. So we would like to introduce ourselves to you all. I'm Maureen Brooks. I'm the branch chief for wildfire prevention and community mitigation with the Forest Service in the Washington office. We are in an organization that's called Landscapes and Partnerships in Fire and Aviation Management. And I'll introduce Cheryl.
Hi, my name is Cheryl Page. I'm the National Community Wildfire Mitigation Program Manager. I work with Maureen in the branch with wildfire prevention and mitigation, and I'm based out of Colorado. Thanks, Maureen.
Thank you, Cheryl. So we are going to get started on our talk. We kind of looked at it as reducing wildfire risk as the topic of our presentation. And one of the things that we wanted to share with you, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later, is that, you know, at the Washington office level, we have been working on some national strategies for both prevention and mitigation. And we wanted to share with you that it is our vision that through these two programs, we want to the goal is to reduce unwanted human-caused ignitions and the negative impacts of wildfire to communities, while also, you know, in some supporting the benefits of wildfire. And then, you know, our mission, the thing that we work toward every day is that we're focused on trying to deliver sustainable wildfire prevention and community mitigation programs that are integrated. It's our view that they need to be integrated at all levels of our agencies to reduce human-caused ignitions and wildfire impacts to communities. The thing that I feel very strongly about is that we're trying to bring about a paradigm shift in, so to speak, in fire across the nation and across our agencies, in that prevention and mitigation, and also our friends in fuels, you know, we're really when it comes to fire management, we are the tip of the spear. And that's how I look at us. We are the tip of the spear. We are what should be thinking about ahead of suppression. Someone also told me that if we have to go put out a fire, then we've failed at our jobs in prevention and mitigation. And there may be some truth to that. So I wanted to share that with you because that is really the driving vision that we have in our national program. You know, and we'll get to Smokey Bear, who is, you know, my favorite, but you know, most of the time people think of our jobs is that it's, you know, it's just about Smokey Bear. And I'm preaching to the choir, but we all know it's a lot more than that. So we'll get at it here. A few things that we're going to talk about today is what is wildfire risk? How do we look at that? And then, you know, the subtitle, cause-focused planning, what is that? And how do we actually achieve it? And how does this all reduce wildfire risk? And then at the end, we're going to talk about, you know, have an open discussion about how you can apply what you've learned from this workshop. Next slide.
Maybe.
There we go.
There we go. So, wildfire risk, what is it? So generally, we look at wildfire risk in the context of likelihood, intensity, exposure, and susceptibility. So to truly reduce wildfire risk, we really need to be looking at these 4 items. And the next few slides, we're going to be really kind of going into a little bit more depth as far as how each of these items relate to wildfire risk and how cost-focused planning targets each of these items.
So when we think about the likelihood of wildfire, we consider some items that impact the likelihood of a wildfire igniting and the conditions that it ignites in. So in the fire environment, we look at topography, the lay of the land, the weather, and how they will influence the ignition, the actual start of the wildfire. We can't really control topography and weather, but we do have influence on the ignitions. And, so prevention really considers the when, where, and what is causing the ignition. So in cost focused planning, we want, as we look at our ignition data, no matter where we are in the country, but looking at that, relying on that ignition data, and we need to think about, frame our work in that cost focused planning under the 3 A's and the A. So education, engineering, enforcement, and administration. So we want to, it's we try to we want to really focus our work in those categories, which will then ultimately cover all that we need when it comes to our ignition problem, dealing with our ignition problems. So there are some, you know, fire investigation and reporting. The better we are at reporting and investigating our fires will end up giving us better data to work on. We're going to show you some data sources that are available nationally. You probably have local data sources that are, more detailed and better, but there is data out there. Looking at another new tool, I will say new tool, but it's a few years in the making, is what we fondly call WIPSAPs, but it's Wildfire Prevention, Spatial Assessment, and Planning Strategies. It's a software program that will help you develop your wildfire prevention plans. And there are trainings going on now in the country on how you can implement WIPSAPs within your wildfire prevention and mitigation programs. And we would encourage you, to take advantage of those. And then implement your actions to reduce the unwanted human caused ignitions. And we have some data that shows that from the just when you're talking from the 75th anniversary or birthday of Smokey's year, we have national data that shows that the money that we invested into that entire program actually drove down human count. By the time we looked at the national human caused fires before and after the that birthday year, we actually had a 15% reduction in human caused wildfires that year. And most of that work was outreach, right? It was general outreach. So we know that the more we invest in prevention and mitigation, the the return on our investment is actually very great, and it's measurable. And WIPSAPS uses Preston studies to look at the investment in wildfire prevention and then what our return is. So we're implementing that science and data into our work, and that is key. So, some of the other resources that we have out there in in prevention. Our fire investigation courses that nationally are available, informs, the use of informs. I mentioned WIPSAPs. We have prevention teams, which are, many, I know many in the South have used prevention teams and been part of prevention teams, but those resources are available basically year round. And you'll hear more about that from Zach Ellinger here in a day or so. But those resources are there, and there are ways to use them, at the state level, at the unit level. And, sometimes you just have to be a little creative with the dollars, but, we have, on how you're going to fund those resources, but there are there are ways to do that, whether it's through grants or whatnot. And another resource that we have, that I think Cheryl and I both provided some, well, we both provided some resource lists to Robin, and we can put them in the chat if we need to. But there's a website out there called wildfirerisk.org that we'll show you a little bit later, but it does have a tool on there about ignition data across the country on human-caused wildfires. So that website, if you haven't visited it, provides a wealth of information about, and it is focused on communities and how they can protect themselves, but it also provides a wealth of information for us and links to other resources. So I would encourage you to look at wildfirerisk.org.
Thanks, Maureen. Moving on, as far as looking at intensity item that we want to address when we look at wildfire risk. Intensity is really when an ignition has occurred. So understanding how much fuel there is to burn and the condition those fuels are in really help frame how intense a wildfire will be. So when we talk about cost-focused planning, we want to look at this piece. What is causing those high-intensity fires? Is this really normal? And so when you start looking at that, you can really start identifying actions that you can take. So this goes back into that planning piece as far as what types of actions do you need to take to reduce fuel loading, change the fuel conditions. And this is, you're looking at your public lands within communities and around infrastructure. So in other words, you're looking at ways to change the amount of fuels that are available to burn, and then also look at ways to increase resiliency or the health of the fuels that are around those areas. So the other piece to this is also kind of dialing into more of the community, kind of like what David was saying, is that we need to take this down to that community level and look at how we can reduce the fuel loading in these areas and change those fuel conditions. And it is really looking at, what is that landscaping that is around? And are we planning communities and developments with that in mind? Are we putting in non-native plants that are highly flammable? And then are we, the maintenance around, the landscaping around properties? And are we working, in some of our, if there's open spaces, are we looking at, the health of those open spaces and working at planning actions that will increase the resiliency of those areas? So those are some things that, just to consider when looking at the intensity piece. And then as far as ways you can start planning for that, of course, there's tons of resources out there when it comes to um, reducing fuel loading and improving fuel condition. A lot of that is through a variety of grant programs that are out there. And then, of course, the community planning piece is huge. So those community wildfire protection plans are another key item to consider. And then also, what tends to get forgotten about is our utility corridors and the infrastructure, and ensuring that we're looking at those areas as well as far as the fuel loading and the fuel condition. And I'm working with those utility providers. They tend to have some resources as well that can support the fuels reduction piece. With that, I'll turn this. Let's see. We'll move on to exposure. So exposure, these next few slides are going to be really about discussing the built environment. And so, and that is really key, especially when it comes to lessening damage within our communities. So when we talk about exposure, it is important to think about where fires are occurring and where the structures and other values are at risk. This is really important to know the level of exposure for our structures and infrastructure when it comes to wildfire impacts. A really key piece as far as when it comes to cause-focused planning is really looking at your community wildfire protection plans. And these plans should have this level of information in there. And so you understand where those fires are in relationship to those structures. If you're starting to see that these fires are occurring within these communities around these other values at risk, then those are some things that you really need to start consider. And I'll turn it over to Maureen to talk more about the prevention actions.
Thank you, Cheryl. So, um, these things kind of run in tandem when we're thinking about our planning for prevention and community mitigation. And a couple of things I think are important to think about is it's not only important for you to understand what what your ignitions are in the area that you work and why they're occurring, but I think it's also important for the community to understand because it's a problem that human caused ignitions are a problem that we all can work on. Um, so if our communities understand, they can actually be help to be part of the solution when it comes to human caused ignitions. So, you know, investigations are important. Reporting, as the better we get at reporting, the better data that we'll have. And then knowing the details of our ignition sources for human caused ignitions, that's when we can really do some targeted outreach in our communities, within our communities, and around our communities. So I think it's important to, be thinking of, how can the community help out, in helping to reduce the number of human caused ignitions. And that can play into our CWPPs for sure. It can also, Firewise communities, any of our other, you know, so, like I said, integrated resources that we have. Um, you know, some of the things that you may think about when you talk about targeting action, prevention actions, or is bringing in prevention teams at specific times of year. Um, utilizing WIPSAPs to help us determine what are the most effective strategies for reducing those particular human caused ignitions. And I mentioned earlier about fire occurrence data sets. There's a couple of, you know, couple of data sets that have come online. Oftentimes, people look at the NIFC site, and that's fully acceptable. But when you want to get some detail, um, on wildfirerisk.org now we have a a uh, a table. Well, it's a tableau actually, but it's a real. We'll show it to you in a few minutes, and it's in our handouts also. But it's it can really brings the data down to a county level, and it tells you what your human caused fires are, what are your most predominant human caused fires, what time of year are they occurring, um, and it gets you down to the what I will call the local level. You may have better data. There's another data set out there that was done by BLM that can actually, I guess it parses out a little the fires a little more in more detail. So you can really, it's not really good for public consumption because it's difficult. It's complex, a little more complex as a tableau, but it it helps us get to that whole point of planning for our prevention programs.
Thanks, Maureen. Yeah, and
Thank
the
you.
other thing, with being able to pull in that community into the planning piece is huge, and it really can uh, improve. I get that understanding of that exposure and giving a better idea of what is truly at risk and being able to provide a lot more focus into those areas. So the other piece to wildfire risk is looking at the susceptibility and understanding how prone communities and infrastructure are to wildfire impacts. Assessing structures provides information about the areas on and around the structure that are susceptible to wildfire impacts. Addressing human-caused ignition areas near values, such as home, rentals, businesses, and infrastructure, reduces the number of chances a wildfire would occur in these areas. You know, so as far as when you look at that structure and ignitability, those structure assessments really come into play as far as identifying where on a structure those areas are susceptible to wildfire impacts. Same goes with, the infrastructure piece. When you're looking at, uh, the maintenance of these areas and ensuring that just, for example, some of the power line utility corridors, that maintenance is key to be able to ensure that if a fire does occur, that the infrastructure is protected due to the maintenance activity that's around it, because you've really reduced the the fuels around it, which of course goes back to looking at that intensity. But then it also, your infrastructure is less susceptible to wildfire damage. And the same goes with the landscapes. And as far as um, looking at those vegetation management, maybe that you've identified in your community wildfire protection plan. And those really identify those key areas that are really susceptible to wildfire impacts. And so be able to take some of those mitigation actions to reduce the fuels that reduces the intensity, and then also the susceptibility of that landscape burning at a higher intensity level that we don't want it to burn at. And then as far as, there's many great resources out there that really can tie into this. Of course, a lot of folks, especially in the news, might have heard about the community wildfire defense grants. That is one piece that really can dive into looking at that cost-focused planning through the community wildfire protection plans. And Also, some other programs out there, such as Firewise, Ready, Set, Go. A lot of these programs have resources that really can help communities look at some of this and provide some focus in on looking at that structure and nighttability, the maintenance of infrastructure, and then also looking at that landscape resiliency.
So we've talked a bit about cause focused planning, and I will say that it's an initiative that that we are supporting this year to develop um, or to be thinking more on that line, be focusing our prevention planning, our prevention plans on what are the causes. So, thinking about as we as you develop those, what are the ignition sources? When are they happening and where are they occurring? Sometimes why are they occurring? I really believe that the public has a right to know. And they can be a great ally in this, especially if they understand that their communities are threatened. So with that, one of the things that we are doing this year is we've been rolling out the WIPSAPS training, and you'll hear more about that from Fred a little bit later, Fred Turk. But we have an actual, we have a plan that we are over the course of this calendar year rolling out those virtual training sessions and encouraging all of our people in the Forest Service and all of our partners to um, take those classes and put those our um, into play. So that thinking, really we're we're all very busy, and I think another benefit of cause focused planning is that we are really focusing our resources to where they need to be working on the most. So if your main causes are um, campfires, then um, then you can focus your resources and your time on preventing escape campfires. If it's debris burning, then you can focus there. I think it will cause really be more efficient for us as we move through, and we will see enhanced results as well as savings. And I think that'll be seen in our WIPSAPS programming. So
Yeah, and just I was
go
just
ahead.
going to say, just to add to that, Maureen, it also, this cost focused planning really helps when you find out where those fires are occurring, because then you really can focus in on those areas, both on the prevention and the mitigation side of things. And that is something that Maureen mentioned earlier. We're really trying to integrate these resources that we have, because it does really support that wildfire risk reduction when you look at it at that holistic approach.
Um,
There we
so,
go.
oh, here we go. Excellent. Sorry about that. So, what we wanted to really kind of move into is to share with you some of the current work that we're doing and open it up for you to share some of the work that you all are doing and how it is how it all relates together. um, we we wanted to show you some of the, like I said, kind of promo some of the work that we're doing that's coming out rather soon. So we wanted to I guess the first thing I already mentioned was WIPSAPs. So we do have the training course, a virtual training course It is available to you, and as I mentioned, Fred is going to talk more about that. We expect that in 2024, those training classes will continue. And for those of you who are out there who have used WIPSEPs, we also would encourage you to join us in the training cadre for that. The other piece that we wanted to mention was about um, fire ignition data. So I've mentioned it a couple of times, but I wanted to show you on the next slide um, just a little snapshot of this tool that I mentioned. This is on wildfirerisk.org, and there's a link to it in the handout that I have for prevention. And basically, this, it's a map of the United States. It's pretty in very easy to work, but it also, in this example is Tennessee, where our hosts are. Um, so 98% of the human caused fires were determined to be from um, human uh, human fires. 2% were caused by lightning. Um, the nice thing about this tool is you can select the state, and then from the state you can select a county. You can select a decade. There's almost 3 decades of data within this tool. It gives you a sense of over that decade that you chose. Uh, that middle graph is the causes by human causes by year. And then, at the bottom gives you a real breakout of what your highest causes are. And then also by month when most of your activity is. So when you go there to that site, you can play with it and look around. It's a handy tool for general information. As I mentioned, many of you may have more detailed information that you would like to use. That's completely fine. But, we're trying to get this information out to the public. An aware public is a helpful public. So, it's just one of the tools that we wanted to show you. There's another link in the to fire ignition data that's in the handout, and that's to the other tableau that I mentioned, which will allow you to dig a little deeper into fire causes across the country. Couple of other things that are in the on the horizon and that we've been working on nationally are in as many of you probably already know that there will be within the coming year there will be 2 eclipse events that will cross this country. Total eclipse events. So one is in October of this year, happens to be in Fire Prevention Week, which is kind of convenient. But and then also and that one will go from Oregon down through Texas. The other eclipse will go from Texas up through the mid part of the country and arc out through New England. That will be in April of next year, also during fire season for many people. So we are anticipating, like the 2017 eclipse events, that there will be many people visiting our public lands. And so we've been working nationally. We've had an interagency committee together for probably about a year now. And we've developed some talking points, social media. It's unbranded, so it doesn't have an agency on it, but we have social media stills and video resources that you'll be able to use. We have artwork, and the symbols cache is going to be putting some products. You probably have like 4 products related to the eclipse events that will be available for you to use and purchase, but we'll also have artwork available for you that if you want to make your own local products, you can. And all these are focused on outreach to the public on preventing ignitions while they are out enjoying the eclipse events. So, but they're resources for you to use, and we will have them up on smokeybear.com in the toolkit for you to download it should be by the end of May. We're kind of working now on like the how it's going to look and how it's organized up there. So that'll be live, by the end of the month. So you'll be able to, utilize that. And then products will be in the cache sometime this summer. So keep looking at Symbols Cache. The other big event that we're working on is Smokey's 80th, which will be in 2024. We also have an interagency committee working on that, and that will be similar to, you'll see some similar things that we did in the 75th. We're going to open and close it with the two big parades, the Tournament of Roses parade at the beginning of the year, and then at the end of the year, Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade. In between, there'll be some Smokey Bear live events for educational for classrooms. There'll be an on-site Facebook Live event that we're working on in the summer. So plus, and plus we're also working on what I think will be a fun project that you'll be able to implement out in the field, is like a Smokies, we're calling a Smokies Reading Challenge. So it'll be something that you can potentially do with your local libraries or local schools. And we'll have that out and available this fall for when the schools open up. But we'll also have a toolbox for you on smokeybear.com in the toolkit. So you'll be able to find out those kinds of things. Plus, we're starting to put out a newsletter, so you'll be able to get that information on what's happening quarterly as we lead up to the 24th, or excuse me, the 80th in 2024. So we do have some big projects, like we've been working on WIPSAPs and the Ignition Data Eclipse and Smokey's 80th birthday, amongst a ton of other things. But those were some that I just wanted to share with you to be on the lookout for over the next couple of months. Cheryl.
Yeah, and as far as just some other resources, and Robin should be able to provide you a document that has a nice long laundry list of community wildfire mitigation resources. But just some things I wanted to highlight is that we really are looking at trying to increase people's capability when it comes to community wildfire mitigation. And so we are increasing some of the courses that we have. One in which that I get to work with coalitions and collaboratives on is our Community Wildfire Mitigation Best Practices course. We've really increased the number of courses that are available, and we've really been trying to tie into where folks are at as far as some of these workshops, some of the academies, the fire training academies, some of the conferences. So, but we also have that ability to have those classes also virtually, so online, and that increase, we're seeing that the need is more and more, because the classes have been filled each time. And so that is something that we're really working on in the next few years, to really increase the amount of courses that are available for that. Some of the other things that we have as far as resources, we have, through coalitions and collaboratives, the Action Implementation Mitigation Grants. Those are really community level grants that provide different opportunities for that community to give them like that little Kickstarter for community wildfire mitigation. Some of the other resources, we've been working with Firewise communities and trying to increase the amount of resources and also opportunities to work with some of the recent initiatives out there, such as the Community Wildfire Defense Grants, and then also look at where we can start showing that communities road, towards fire adaptation. So there'll be some things coming forth with Firewise communities. The other one we've been working with is the Ready, Set, Go program, and really trying to increase the number of localized resources and the variety of resources that are provided for those that become Ready, Set, Go program members. And there's no cost to that as far as becoming a Ready, Set, Go member. So that is something that, it's open to fire departments and communities. So it's something that we're really trying to ensure that we look at the feedback that we receive and are trying to increase those resources out to those communities. And this is something that both Maureen and I have been working on when we talk about integration is we really wanted to ensure that we had a place for folks to get integrated resources that address both community wildfire prevention and mitigation. And so we've been working on a community of practice SharePoint site that will provide at this time, we have a lot of resources that are available, of course, for USDA Forest Service employees, but we have also are expanding that base to really work to have information for state and local practitioners in both community wildfire prevention and mitigation. Anything else, Maureen, you want to mention on that one?
Sorry about that. Yeah, we're real excited about this project because it should be coming out here in the next month, and it'll be a work in progress. So think about
Yes.
think about that. If there's resources that you need, we'll be able to add if you have a .gov address, and also I understand there's something we can do for .edus. We haven't figured. Cheryl and I are still learning about this, but if you you'll be able to to join that wildfire risk to community, or excuse me, the community of practice for prevention and mitigation. We'll just have to, add you to the site. So I hope we'll be getting it out to you probably through EJ. Will be our first line of notification, and then we'll be able to add you to the site as you requested. So, um, yeah.
Yeah, so just thinking about all that we just went over and this being a learning exchange, we'd like to learn from you all on how some of your local efforts and some of the things that you're doing to really look at reducing wildfire risk through cost-focused planning. So we'll open it up and I guess not sure how you want to do this, Robin. If folks can just either raise their hand or come off mute, that would be perfect.
That'd be great. Yeah, if you have a question, you can put it in the chat, or you can just unmute yourself and talk online, talk live.
Hey, this is Mary Leathers, and we're talking about communities and outreach and our targeted audience. I'm looking more at that a higher level, like the county judges and commissioners within the state of Texas is getting that packet sent to them. They don't have a lot of time to do a lot of reading, so that helpful resource list with a quick maybe statements or points would be helpful. Is that going to be something available for like our elected officials or those that are at that decision making level?
Yes.
I would say you can take anything from that list. It's all public. And if you want to make it into an information sheet, you're welcome to it.
Okay, thank you. Because one of the key things when we're dealing with these folks is when we're talking about these the outreach and projects is grant information or funding. As we all know, that's one of the key elements, is them looking at, how do I pay for this?
Mhm. So
Yeah, and I was just going to say, and what's great about some of those resources, just like what we showed with wildfirerisk.org, you can really start painting that picture for them as far as what is that wildfire risk. Being able to show where those fires are occurring and be able to provide that opening for them to discuss, this is really worth that investment. And some of those other tools that are out there, some of those planning tools really do help provide some of that information to, I guess, get that conversation started, especially with your elected officials.
Can you
Okay.
hear me okay? Michael Downey here in Virginia. Kind of new to the program here, and there's a program I found called Fireworks. It's a fireworks educational program, but it seems like it's more focused in Rocky Mountain and in the Northern Rockies. And how I see that there's trunks and materials available is that how can I get that to kind of make its way more east?
Good question. That fireworks curriculum was developed quite many moons ago, I'll say.
mhm.
And yes, and it was based mainly on Western forest. And that might be something to work through some of your research, the Southern Research Station, to see if they have any resources available to adapt that to. A lot of the items that are within that fireworks curriculum are easily attainable. When I used to do prevention, one of the things that we did was we pulled a lot of the resources that were more relevant to our area. So sometimes that's a lot easier to pull the items that are more localized, and then also utilizing images and things that are familiar to folks within your area. So it's a great tool. You can take it and personalize it as well. Does that
Thank
help?
you.
Uh-huh.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
So
Hannah
Maureen
Thompson.
Page.
Hannah Thompson has her hand up. Go ahead, Hannah.
Good morning, everybody. There is an effort to modify that curriculum to the Southeast already underway. There are several practitioners around the region that are working on that already.
Awesome, Hannah. And you'll let folks know, or maybe Robin, to get it out to this group once that is updated. That would be great.
Absolutely.
Maureen, Cheryl, we had a couple of questions in the chat. One was the handouts. When and where will they be available?
I can probably answer that. What we'll probably do at the end of each day is just do an email to all participants with all the handouts. I think that'll be easier. That way you'll be able to have them all in one location where you can download those. I've also pasted some of the information into the chat already that's in the handouts, where you'll have those active links. But just look for an email from me at the end of the day, and they'll have everything that was presented that day.
All right, perfect. And then there was another question, curiosity about how involved the NPS is in the national scope prevention and mitigation work with Maureen and Cheryl. They're a major player and natural partner in many areas, but may be under involved. So your thoughts on that?
Yeah, actually, Maureen and I both presented to the Department of Interior at one of their meetings. And one of the discussion points that we had is we really like having these national level meetings and these integrated meetings. So we are having discussions about trying to have a national meeting between our two agencies so that we can have these discussions as far as what each agency is doing at that national level when it comes to prevention and mitigation. And so, yes, those discussions are definitely underway. And Maureen, I'm not sure, I think she had to step away for a minute, but anything to add if you're still there? Oh, she's on hold. Okay. So, other questions? I think there were some more in the chat, you said.
Are we waiting to get called, or I know some people are chiming in.
Oh, okay.
You're welcome to just chime in. If you want to unmute and chime in, that's fine.
Go for it, Gwen.
Well, you knew I was going to have a question.
Of course.
Yes. First of all, great job on the presentation. I lots of good resources there, and yeah, a couple that I hadn't heard of. I was wondering if there was any movement on additional research that was being done on the effectiveness of wildfire prevention strategies. So, you know, when I left, we had started this bid with Joint Fire Science Program, and they were supposed to start work on that. And I just was wondering if you have an update on that.
Yeah, actually, the Sam and Jeff Prestiman Sam Scranton with BIA and Jeff Prestiman have been working on a Joint Fire Science project, you know, to get funding to take that data from that we've been collecting from WIPSAPs to take it to put it back into the research that his original research, and really help to validate that initial project. So yeah, I haven't heard yet if it's actually been funded, but they've the process the proposal has been put together. So we're just waiting to hear.
Okay. Is that I knew they were using the information from WIPSAPs that Jeff Prestiman would then start using for more research. What I was particularly thinking about was the Joint Fire Science Program had put together, they had taken proposals, and there was a lot
For
of rating
prevention.
of those proposals.
Mhm.
Yeah.
They haven't actually included as a category, you know, for proposals. It's kind of still a one-off.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I have to ask, since you guys are talking about mitigation, has there been any movement on, you know, as a Forest Service is not the only ones that are guilty, but every place I've ever visited, everybody on this call should look at their own buildings and their own structures and see if they are going to sustain or survive a wildfire. Has there been any additional work on our risk to our own community, our own buildings?
Mhm.
Yes, actually, we
Good.
just completed a pilot project, and we've been pulling together a report that we're going to provide to leadership with recommendations for implementing the Forest Service Resilient Structures project, or program, I should say. And so, yes, I know, yay. So it is, yeah, very exciting. There weren't, any major ahas that we saw in that pilot project. Is that we just have, there's quite a few structures out there that we really want to ensure that we are providing a safe place for our employees and the public to be at. So that is something, yes, that the agency is working on, definitely. Nice, Gwen.
All right.
Great questions.
Thanks. I'm glad to hear that. Thanks. Good to see you guys.
Any other questions?
Oh, and then I think that there was a question about what is the fireworks curriculum? It's it's essentially like a fire ecology type curriculum that explores through kind of activities as far as what is fire and how that relates to local ecosystems.
Mhm.
And so it has a variety of age groups that you can target with that curriculum. It really it's a great way to get into public school system, and it ties in with a lot of the science curriculum
Mhm.
as well.
There's a
So this
nice
is-
link to it in the chat now.
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. All right.
Hey, this is Mary Leathers again, and I know we were talking about resources and stuff, and I'm kind of new at the prevention team leader game here, but in going out and then having references to the digital library, is more stuff going to be added? Because I know we've developed great products and outreach that have been approved, but I'm not seeing those on the digital library. And I know that's a time-consuming thing, but I think it's worth the time invested to get
Mhm.
that updated. And then the stuff for the eclipse and all these other references that you're talking about emailing to the participants, it would be great if there was folders on that library where new folks coming in can have that, and us folks that can go quickly to reference it rather than dig through emails. So
Right.
that's my 2 cents worth on that.
Well, no, that's a good point. So we don't control the NWCG site. And I think the digital library question would be good for Zach Ellinger, as far as the, how what the plan is, or if there is a plan to add to that. The community of practice site will have, once we have, it will have the links to the toolkit on there once we get that up and running here later this month. So we'll, and we'll be able to add, that is something we can control, and we will be adding all the resources to that community of practice site.
Okay,
thing
any other questions
All right.
for these guys? While you got them, better get the information.
Hey. Well,
Well,
thanks
Maureen and Cheryl,
everyone.
yeah, we
Yeah.
really appreciate you being able to join us this morning.
Mhm.
And I'm sorry, I got kind of started off. I didn't formally introduce you with your bio, so I was glad that you were able to jump in there and provide some information. We will be providing the bios for all of our presenters in the information that we'll be getting out to you.
All right.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
You're welcome.
you.
Thank you all.
Great. Well, we're off to a great start. So now we have a break actually until 10:30.